My parents were living with us until my husband Andrew, who is a little older than I am, requested me to move out of our house recently. I was surprised and perplexed by his abrupt demand. He even threatened to file for divorce from me if I refused to comply with his demands. He had been more reclusive over the last 2 weeks, and our relationship had grown resentful of one another. Even though I paid $2,900 a month for all of our living expenditures, he appeared to simply ignore this. He said, for reasons I couldn't quite understand, that his parents wouldn't be comfortable having me around. I was very taken aback, but I gave in to his demand, packed my things, and walked out, seeing a look of satisfaction on his face. I called a resale store right away to have my belongings managed after I left. I'm Isabella, and my spouse Andrew is my housemate. After initially connecting through mutual connections, we soon became friends. He mentioned in one of our early meetings that he wanted to be a voice actor, which intrigued me because of his endearing voice. We exchanged phone numbers, started hanging out regularly, and before long, even though we never declared our relationship, we were in a relationship. I was drawn to the concept of dating someone older since, at the time, I had just graduated from college, and it felt like I was entering a more responsible stage of my life. Since Andrew is 4 years older than me, my best friend Doris expressed reservations about the age difference. I comforted her by saying that many relationships work well despite age differences. Since Andrew seemed to feel the same way, I didn't see why I should be concerned because I was actually enjoying his company. Following almost 2 years of courtship, the subject of marriage was raised. My parents were intrigued about him when I told them about our age difference and presented him to them. All these talking about the future, I was always wondering when he would pop the question. He did eventually, one evening spent casually in my apartment. Although it wasn't an extravagant romantic gesture, it was sincere and signaled a fresh start for us. Andrew asked so casually, I just said, "Sure, let's get married," in response to his proposal. It was a good reflection of our easygoing lifestyle, which worked well for us both. We took excursions to see each other's family after the proposal, but I wasn't exactly comfortable around Andrew's family. Their house was overflowing with what looked like antiques, but I had a sneaking suspicion they were just copies. Andrew's parents wore opulent branded apparel and flashy jewelry when I first met them, perfectly capturing the look of a well-to-do marriage. It soon became clear that our ideals and tastes were completely different. It was shocking when Andrew's mother made a negative comment about my appearance, but I told myself that as long as Andrew and I were happy, I wouldn't have to spend much time with his family. We moved into a condo after the wedding, but I realized Andrew was being strangely nervous. He asked a curious question one day about a woman from our wedding who was wearing a blue dress. I said, perplexed, that there were multiple visitors dressed in blue. He clarified that he was inquiring about the person who had delivered a speech, even though he wasn't sure who he meant. He knew he meant Doris, my best friend. I verified it, observing that she had on a blue dress. When Andrew inquired about her, it seemed strange that he was interested in her. He explained that he thought he had seen someone who looked like her recently and remembered her speech. It seemed strange that he was suddenly interested in Doris, but before I could ask him more questions, he just laughed it off and went back to his room. Doris called later with some great news. Her lover was going to come home to the U.S. the following year. They have a long and profound bond, having known each other since elementary school and becoming a couple in high school. During middle school, Doris's boyfriend had moved away, but they continued to correspond via letters. When they got back together in high school, he told her he loved her. Doris constantly told romantic stories that I loved to hear. After spending some time in the U.S., her lover was transferred to an international branch and had been working there for a number of years. Their constant communication helped them maintain their great relationship in spite of their distance from one another. I was curious to know if Doris felt her boyfriend would pop the question when he got back, implying that they would get married. Doris laughed at my premature announcement, but said jokingly that I should be ready to deliver a speech that would stand out at her wedding, just as she did at mine. We relaxed and had a good time over tea, appreciating how easy our friendship was and how we could talk about anything and know that one other would be there for us. It was at this time that I began to notice adjustments to Andrew's routine. He was arriving home later and later. He responded that just because we were married, it didn't mean he shouldn't work when I made a comment about his late hours. He was still pursuing his dream of being a voice actor, but in order to pay for his lessons, he had to take a number of part-time jobs with little guarantee of success. As a result, I took care of all of our living expenditures, which made it impossible for us to accumulate any savings. It became evident over time that Andrew was not willing to compromise his goals in order to maintain our family's financial security. His long work hours made me more concerned because I thought his part-time job was asking for too much overtime. Andrew brushed off my worries, saying he had everything under control and the extra money was helpful, when I raised the possibility that they were overworking him. The chat was quickly halted by his brusque reaction, and I noted that he was now referring to me impersonally as you, rather than by my name. This small adjustment gave our interactions a touch of coldness that made me worry more about where we were going as a couple. When Andrew and I got married, I imagined he would continue to speak to me with kindness. However, following our wedding, his demeanor shifted drastically. His once soothing, deep voice became grating and harsh, an effect I suspected was due to excessive drinking. Considering he was an aspiring voice actor, this lifestyle seemed detrimental to his vocal health, and I worried about his well-being. Despite my concerns, Andrew appeared indifferent and began to distance himself from me, often ignoring me entirely at home. It was around this time that my friend Doris reached out, wanting to discuss something important. Given my personal concerns, I proposed we meet at a private karaoke booth to talk undisturbed. Doris seemed particularly cautious about her choice of room, selecting one that allowed a clear view of the staff from the door. Curious, I asked her why she had chosen this particular spot. She explained that she had felt someone following her ever since she quit her job a month ago. Choosing a room with visibility allowed the staff to keep an eye out for any suspicious individuals who might be lurking nearby. I asked if she had involved the police. Doris replied that she had tried, but without any physical contact or direct threats, the police were limited in how they could help. She planned to discuss the matter with her boyfriend when he returned in a month, but in the meantime, she wanted to confide in someone close by. Doris hadn't seen her stalker clearly, too frightened to make out whether it was a man or a woman. I promised to help her keep a lookout, hoping to identify the person tailing her through my observations. I shockingly discovered that the individual following Doris was none other than my husband, Andrew. Despite his claims of working late, he had been spending his evenings lurking near Doris's workplace, following her after his shifts ended. This revelation was a heavy burden, and while I had planned to discuss my strained relationship with Andrew, uncovering his disturbing behavior became the immediate priority. The situation was far more serious than I had anticipated, leaving me to grapple with both my crumbling marriage and the safety of my dear friend. The day I found out that Andrew was the one stalking Doris was a profound shock, a betrayal that shattered my trust completely. Watching him follow my best friend with a creepy, unsettling grin was chilling. I had loved and married this man, but in that instant, my feelings evaporated, leaving a cold void where affection once resided. I immediately confided in Doris about the discovery, and together we took swift action to ensure her safety. With assistance from her co-workers, arrangements were made for her to be discreetly driven from the underground parking lot of her workplace to her new residence, helping her stay out of Andrew's reach. As Doris and I implemented these security measures, I could see Andrew's irritation mounting. One day, his frustration erupted out of nowhere. Andrew demanded that I leave our home to make room for his parents, threatening divorce if I resisted. His audacity was astounding, especially considering that I was the one covering our living expenses, a hefty $2,900 monthly. I wondered if he even remembered or cared about that fact as I stared at him incredulously. His patience snapped, and he lost his temper completely, shouting for me to leave so his parents could move in. Stunned yet resolute, I replied, "Fine, but I'm taking everything I purchased with me." The moment I agreed to leave, Andrew instructed me to hurry. Wasting no time, I contacted a local buyback service to handle the removal of my belongings. When they arrived the next day to assess the items, Andrew watched, initially smug in his assumption that I was simply conceding defeat. However, his smugness quickly turned to shock as he realized that nearly all the furniture in our apartment was being evaluated for removal, furniture that I had paid for. This upheaval underscored the deep rift between us, highlighting not just a failing marriage, but a profound misunderstanding and disrespect that had been festering beneath the surface. As the buyback service carried away piece after piece, it symbolized the dismantling of the life and home we had tried to build together. After the staff finished evaluating all the items in our apartment, excluding those in Andrew's personal room, they presented me with a quote. The total value of the furniture and appliances amounted to $30,000. Without hesitation, I signed the document to proceed with the sale. This decision seemed to snap Andrew back to reality, and in a moment of panic, he grabbed my arm. "Wait, why are you selling everything? My parents are supposed to live here. How will they manage without furniture?" I pulled away from his grasp sharply. "What do you mean?" "When we got married, you were so broke from your acting classes that you practically begged me to cover the rent, the furniture, and all our living expenses. I didn't realize just how broke you were. I feel deceived." I reminded him pointedly about the $2,900 monthly expenses I had been paying. "From now on, you'll need to cover those expenses, especially with your parents moving in. It'll likely be even more," I stated firmly. Andrew's face turned pale, but he quickly tried to regain his composure. "You thought you could bring up money and I'd back out of the divorce? Who do you think you are?" He then defensively added, "I've already found a wealthy woman." Processing Andrew's revelation about his relationship with a wealthy woman, I began to suspect he might be confusing his stalker-like behavior towards Doris as a close relationship. If he considered that closeness, he was severely mistaken. Doris indeed came from a wealthy background. Her grandfather was a successful businessman, and her father now managed the family business. Doris was the epitome of a perfect AYS, yet she never flaunted her wealth. She lived modestly, just like me and our friends, and no one judged her based on her family's money. It dawned on me that Andrew might have learned about Doris's affluent background and misconstrued it, considering his skewed perception and desperate actions. This understanding added a layer of sadness and irony to the whole situation, revealing not just the dissolution of our marriage, but also the delusions and deceit that had underpinned Andrew's intentions from the start. Andrew's assumption that Doris would be a better match for him because of her wealth was both absurd and infuriating. Wealth does not define someone's value, particularly not in matters of the heart. Yet Andrew seemed to think it did, a notion that only fueled my frustration. I was positive that Doris would never consider getting married to someone with his kind of background. Her boyfriend, with whom she had been in high school, was scheduled to return to the state shortly. "They'll probably get married," I told Andrew, who looked visibly surprised to hear that his pretended intimacy with Doris was really a fantasy. Andrew attempted to defend himself by saying, "But I always walk Doris home," clinging to whatever link he believed to exist. "You should consider yourself lucky you weren't reported to the police," I replied. But I didn't know she had a boyfriend. Andrew made a feeble protest. Since elementary school, they have been pen friends, and they communicate almost daily. And her boyfriend is a successful man, even acknowledged by her father, unlike you, who've been working part-time jobs, I said, emphasizing the clear differences between him and Doris's boyfriend. While the buyback workers were removing the appliances and furnishings, Andrew was trying to gather his composure. I suppose all I have left is you. Striking a nice pose, he asked, "You'll support my dream of becoming a voice actor forever, right?" I gave his query a chilly look. Pardon me? I've already begun the divorce procedure by seeing a lawyer. From now on, let's contact our attorneys. Andrew held to my waist, maybe thinking I still felt something for him. Don't make remarks like that, he begged. Haven't we been getting along all this time? Getting along? You've been distant and hanging around with my best friend Doris ever since you learned that she's a wealthy AYS, I shot back, making it obvious that his behavior were dishonest and self-serving. Everything had fallen apart as a result of his foolish quest of fortune via relationships, and it was now time for me to go on with him while maintaining my dignity and sense of reality. It became clear to me that marrying you was a mistake. Not long after our marriage vows, Andrew broke down in tears, acting more like a kid than a man who was 4 years my senior. The more I watched him cry, the more my feelings for him grew distant. I could no longer even live in the same room as him without feeling suffocated. I stated, "I just can't do this anymore," with a hint of exasperation in my tone. I went on, "By the way, I've spoken to your uncle, the one who owns this apartment, about our divorce." In a matter-of-fact manner. When Andrew realized how serious the issue was, his expression plummeted. "Unclear? But you are aware of his strictness," he shot out, sounding panicked. "Considering that I've been covering our rent and living expenses, your uncle suggested finding you a job when I leave," I replied coolly. "This implies that I will also be unable to continue taking voice acting classes." Practice was scarce for Andrew, and it didn't seem like a good idea to stick with something he wasn't entirely devoted to. "Maybe it's time for you to face reality," I said. I angrily cautioned him, "I won't hesitate to call the police if you bother Doris again." With a solid step, I sealed my resolution and left the house, vowing never to come back. My original intention was to return to my parents' home, but if a better chance came up, I would have looked at moving somewhere closer to my place of employment. About Andrew, soon after we split up, his uncle did in fact help him land a job at his business. It's interesting to note that Andrew's parents moved into the flat and began working for the uncle. They had hoped to gain something from their son's marriage to an affluent family. It appeared that their family was prone to opportunism. Leaving behind such a poisonous setting made me feel relieved. Although I had never been worried by the age gap, the experience made me realize how important it would be to choose my future spouse more carefully. Fortunately, after things with Andrew had calmed down, I got a marriage proposal from Doris. She presented me to her long-term partner, and I genuinely hoped for their happiness. Despite my first marriage's failure, I hoped that Doris and I would have a happy and long-lasting marriage.